Hello class, today's topic is the second half of topic 1. This is ecology. Our objective today is simply to look at ecosystem structure and functions and see what are all the parts of ecosystems and how do they interrelate and work together. To begin with an ecosystem structure, we're going to begin with our some really overarching definitions here of ecology and biotic and abiotic factors. So ecology is a study of interactions between organisms and their environments. There are two major factors that we look at when we determine these interactions. We'll look at biotic factors, which are simply the living components and once living components of an ecosystem. Abiotic factors are the non-living parts of ecosystems. These things are non-living, made up of non-living components, and they're major factors that influence the living or the biotic components, such as temperature, soil, sunlight, moisture, air. All of those things have a cumulative effect on ecosystems. Moving on, we're looking at the hierarchy of life in ecology. On the right here, you can see these categories from small all the way up to here to large. Okay, this is going to show really the hierarchy of life in science. We start at the smallest component, which is an atom and a molecule, and work all the way up to a galaxy. In ecology, we really start right about there. Okay, so we only focus on this top half, and we'll go through those as well. Organism is the first one that we'll mention. Then we move up to a population. Then we move to a community, a habitat, and they're getting bigger, the ecosystem, and then the biosphere. Once we talk about the biosphere, that's the entire planet, really, where life can be sustained. We don't really mention the galaxy really in ecology. We kind of skip past that. So going through definitions of each of these just real quickly, and my pictures here will reflect the definitions as well. An organism is anything exhibiting all the characteristics of life as an individual. The lowest level of organization in ecology, boil it down to the individual organism. Now we move up to a population. A population is an individual organism of one species that's living in a group at the same place at the same time. So you can see a swarm of flies here, up from one individual fly. A community would be the next key term. This is interacting populations that inhabit a common environment and are interdependent. This is all the biotic and abiotic, or all the biotic components in an ecosystem, excuse me. So just quite simply, all biotic, that's important. So those living things are all interacting with each other. So we have a spider and a fly. There's demonstrating some predation here. However, those are just the biotic components interacting. The next term we're talking about that's important is an ecosystem. This is all the biotic and abiotic components together in their cumulative influence. So we talk about biotic, abiotic, all the living and non-living things and how they interact together forms our ecosystem. So that's the big definition there. Definitely an important term. Biosphere is the life-supporting portions of the Earth, composed of air, land, fresh water, and salt water. So our planet is commonly just referred to as the biosphere in ecology. It's the highest level of organization, and it's composed of many different biomes, which are separate sections of the biosphere that have similar characteristics. Some important terms here. They all popped up at once, so we'll go through them individually. The habitat. The habitat's really important. This is a place in which an organism lives out its life. Some people refer to it simply as like the organism's address, like where does it hang out in the ecosystem in particular, where's its special place. The next one is the niche. The niche is the role a species plays in a community. The role that a species plays when we talk about it is oftentimes just what is it doing in there? What purpose does it serve? A lot of times we'll refer to this as its job. All right, what does it do? That's definitely another way to think about it. What is a niche determined by? A niche is determined by by the limiting factors in the environment. So we could be talking about any of these things over here. If you're not reading these graphics, all of these things could be limiting factors. Light, heat, mechanical support, organic matter, phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, other nutrients, water and air in particular. What is this? Really, it's saying water is a big limiting factor. Space could be another one. I'll write space in there. And then all these other things are really like nutrients or food. Those things are really the biggest limiting factors when we talk about that. So those things will determine where an organism lives and what it does in an ecosystem. So limiting factors are any biotic or abiotic factor, biotic or abiotic, that's restricting the existence of a species or organism in the environment. So here we put down the big ones: amount of food, or water, food, and temperature. Those are probably the major ones, but these are, like I said, those are other more specific examples, and a lot of them can apply to plants too. So moving on, when we talk about relationships in ecosystems, or feeding relationships, there are four major types or categories of relationships of organisms that we can address here. So we talk about producers. How do producers get their food? Or get their energy, excuse me. A producer is an autotroph, so that's a key term that you're going to need to know. An autotroph, let's use green because an autotroph is for a plant. So producer, plant, autotroph, those are all referring to the same type of organism. They trap energy from the sun, and then they make their own food, and this glucose, sugar. They build those structures through photosynthesis. They're on the bottom of the food chain, obviously. That's good because they're able to harness the energy from the sun, and nothing else can do that besides producers. Now the second thing is a consumer. You and I are consumers. All these other organisms that are eating things are consumers, so we eat other things for energy. Heterotroph is literally broken down into other feeder. That's where it gets its energy from. An autotroph, if you break the word down, auto, that's a self feeder, and heterotroph is an other feeder. They ingest food containing the sun's energy. So that could be a plant. So you could be like an herbivore eating plants, or it could be a carnivore too, because they're still higher on the food chain, but they're still eating other organisms for energy. The last two we have here: scavengers and detritivores, and decomposers. All right, a lot of people lump these into the same category. They're not. They're different. Scavenger, detritivore, something that feeds on dead animals and plants but does not return nutrients back to the soil. That's the key difference. So these are, I just like to think of them as eating bigger chunks of things. So like our pill bugs, we looked at in class, and these vultures are still going to leave material behind to decompose. That's key. Decomposer is different because it breaks down the complex compounds of dead, decaying plants and animals, but it returns nutrients back to soil. So things like bacteria and fungi are really finely breaking material down and returning it into the soil. We have some population interactions we like to talk about here. This is referring to competition and some other distinct and unique relationships that we see in ecosystems. There's a lot of them. We're going to break down some basic ones here. The first thing, we usually break competition down and just say competition is when organisms compete or seek to utilize the same resource. They're fighting over some kind of resource. So we see the lion and the hyena fighting here, these two bears duking it out. What we need to understand is that we can break it down even further than just competition. So these are actually two different types of competition we're looking at. We have interspecific competition and intraspecific competition. So look at the prefix there. Inter is between. That's the key there. Inter is between, and intra means within. So if you didn't know those prefixes, now you do. It's going to help you out. Interspecific is competition between two different species. So that's what we see here. All right, look closely. We have hyenas and a lion fighting over some kind of resource, presumably food, fresh kill, something like that. Here we have intraspecific competition, the competition within the same species. So this intra, they sound similar. So these two bears are presumably of the same species, fighting over some kind of resource. Food, obviously a common one. Another very common one, especially within the same species, would be mates during breeding seasons. Three other population interactions that are unique. We'll give you some examples of each of these. But we have mutualism is the first one. This is a symbiotic relationship where two organisms live together and both benefit. So what we have here is a bee and a flower. They're both living things. The bee is pollinating the flower, and the bee is getting the nutrients that it needs from the flower itself and the pollen. So the bee is going to be a plus, and the flower is going to be a plus. So we would refer to that as a plus-plus or mutualism. Both benefit. Parasitism would be the next one. This is a relationship where one organism benefits at the expense of the other. It lives on or in another organism. So this right here is referred to as a guinea worm. The guinea worm pops out of the bottom of a lower appendage, like a leg or a foot. It lays its eggs. It lives just underneath the skin. We could say that this person here does not look like they're having a very good time, so we'd give them a minus, and we would give the worm, since it's able to reproduce and has a place to live and feed, we'd give the worm a big plus for that. Parasitism, this plus-minus relationship that we see exist, obviously the human or the host is going to be at a disadvantage or be harmed, and the parasite is going to benefit. Parasites live on or in another organism and feed off of them. So this guinea worm living under the skin, wriggling around, you can see it. When you step in the water, it pops its little self out of your leg and sprays eggs all over into the water, and that's how it starts its life cycle over, because then somebody goes and drinks the water with the eggs, and they get a nice new worm. Pretty gross, but kind of cool. Last one, commensalism. We can see our little Nemos here, our clownfish. One organism benefits and the other is unaffected. So the clownfish uses this as protection, so we would give him a plus. The sea anemone is kind of unaffected, so we give them like a little 0 or something like that. That's a good way to symbolize it, because one is being benefited from that relationship and the other one is unaffected.